You know, if they can
Would
deliver
you-
a bomb, they should be able to deliver a child. You know, you know.
That takes,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, but
Mommy, where do babies come from?
Well,
the
well-
drone, honey.
but it, I love it when I love it. I love it when they love me. Hey, y'all see the Grammys last night? You didn't see them?
I did. I was watching parts of them.
So
Yeah.
how did Killer Mike wind up going to jail after the damn Grammys, after winning 3 Grammys?
Oh no, really? Killer Mark, he was just on
Your
Bill
boy,
Maher,
Bill Maher,
right?
Yeah.
well, he talk a lot.
And I was hearing some other stuff. They were throughout some of these different kinds of commentaries I was listening to, and one of them was talking about politics, and they were talking about why more blacks are turning to become Republicans. And they had the nerve to put Jay-Z on there, right? Ask Jay-Z a question, right? And I thought it was like, I'll tell you what my response was, what you hear what the question was. They said, well, why is more younger blacks becoming Republicans? Jay-Z said, well, it's like the lesser of two evils. right, right. And I said, my response was, that was stupid. That was a good response to a reason why somebody, the lesser of two evils. That sounds like victim to me, you know. So, but don't mind me. I believe that we turn to Republicans because we don't know nothing else better to do. We don't understand the mirage that's
I mean, the
going on.
Grammys is a hotbed, though, John.
How do you
Even,
know? Tell
not
me
the
why.
Grammy. Well, you know,
Politics?
equity and
hotbed?
diversity in the Grammys has always been a big subject, right? Just like everything else, just like the topic we're talking about today in technology, right?
Well. Before you get too far ahead of yourself, young lady, which you tend to do, well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to this episode of Black Beat Podcast. Hi, my name is John Washington, and I am your host for the show today. Well, today we tackle a hot topic as part of the special TechWOWlogy series of our upcoming issues in Flossin Magazine. You know, this whole issue around technology and AI and all this, the conversation, the big buzz has been just going on, you know. But before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any beats on this show today. And I like to take a moment to talk about our hosts, and also I like to
Thank our sponsors.
Tired of high gas prices? Save money on your transportation costs with TriMet's reduced fare transit card. If you meet income requirements, you can get your first month free while you enjoy unlimited rides on buses and trains anywhere TriMet goes. That's 1 month free, a $28 value when you sign up today for TriMet's reduced fare card. We'll help you travel smarter and make your money go further no matter what the price is at the pump. Visit TriMet.org/save to learn more and apply today. That's TriMet.org/save. TriMet. How life moves.
So, John, I think we should just jump right into it. You know,
why don't we do that, Fawn?
As you discussed, we're putting out another issue of Flossin Magazine. This issue is entitled TechWOWlogy, right? So, of course, who should be in that issue? We've got to bring Skip Newberry, who's the
Skip.
president of the Oregon Technology the Technology Association of Oregon. He's the president, y'all.
Well, you know, look here, Skip. I thought you was the president. The last time I saw you, you was running for president. But Skip, look, welcome to the show. And as humorous as we're being today, hey, folks, we're tackling a real topic that's, is some real talk these days. And Skip, these big conversations that the United States is having about chips these days, right? The chip war between the U.S. and China. You want to speak a little bit about that, man?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, tell us a little bit what's going on with that thing.
Yeah, so there's definitely been a shift in the last few years in terms of the U.S.'s focus in terms of geopolitics and trade. And looking at what's going on with China, U.S. officials have decided that, we're in kind of an arms race that involves technology.
Wow.
And so the production of chips and other critical goods that power our society, there's kind of a Cold War, if you will, going on there from a trade standpoint. And so the U.S. wants to maintain dominance globally in that in that arena, and they've recognized that there are some gaps in our supply chain and our security as it relates to a reliance on manufacturing and production that's located not in the U.S., right? So this happened during the early parts of COVID, where it kind of exposed a number of sort of gaps in our supply chain system. And as shortages occurred, people were like, oh, wait, we're really heavily reliant on factories and production and know-how that's going on in Asia, not in Europe, not in the U.S., specifically in China. And so you also look at the fact that, a huge percentage of global semiconductor production occurs in Taiwan, which is not in a great spot relative to China historically. And so China's been threatening to take over Taiwan.
Yeah.
So with that is kind of the backdrop. The U.S. has decided we need to bring more of this production back home to the U.S. And so the CHIPS Act in the Biden administration was kind of a big infrastructure and manufacturing focused effort with these geopolitical and trade overtones. And the idea was provide incentives to companies to invest in production in the U.S. Now, Oregon is in an interesting spot because we have some production here, but it's a lot of research and development.
Well, Chip, I mean, that's interesting because as you were talking, and I don't want to date myself necessarily, but we used to have the semiconductor and the chip manufacturing here going on in Oregon. It used to be a pretty big deal back in the day here, especially down. I remember when about 1,500 jobs got lost down in the Salem, Marion County area in reference to conductors, this chip, this whole thing here. So what happened there?
So historically, Oregon, since the days of really Intel's investment here back in the 70s and then 80s, following on from Tektronix's success early in the day, that created a whole bunch of other investments from semiconductor companies that were suppliers of Intel or competitors, looking at the talent base here. And over time, the semiconductor industry has had some ups and downs, right? So if you look at the last 10 years in the U.S., semiconductor employment has been gradually declining.
Right.
But in Oregon, it's been flat.
Wow.
So that's good. I mean, it's not as great as growing, but
nothing.
Right? Yeah, I know.
You maintain it,
So now with the CHIPS Act, we're starting to see with that investment, nationally, semiconductor employment is going to likely end up on the upswing here as more of these investments happen. And so in places like Oregon that were already kind of ahead of the national curve, you'd expect that to go up even more. And so the next 5 years plus are going to be really interesting for Oregon, given all of the semiconductor R&D that's already here and all of the CHIPS Act investments that are coming down the pike. So last year, the state legislature passed a semiconductor economic incentive package in relation to chips that was about $500 million. That included a bunch of incentives for folks who are willing to invest in Oregon. And that then has unlocked about $40 billion worth of project work that's going to be happening in Oregon in the coming years.
Wow.
So
$40 billion?
Billion. And so it's a really interesting time for semiconductor companies and for Oregon, but also for all of the businesses that support and supply semiconductors, right? So trades, construction, all of that is going to be booming as a result of some of these investments.
Chip, let me skip.
We're talking about chips.
Skip and chip. Yeah. But
what could go wrong? Skip
a whole lot. But when I think about this, the history of this, Chip, Skip. When I think about this, I'm asking myself the question, what really made this change the industry? I mean, was there just a time when we weren't using semiconductors these chips and all this stuff? Was the technology just not there? Did it take a reversal? What made this bottom out for me? Because it seemed like these things were insignificant at one point in time, like the price of precious metals were sometimes associated with these things also, so the high prices of these things. So I'm thinking that do they still use gold and silver and all these things in these things? And you're looking at the price of gold today at 2,000. So what occurred that really made this lay dormant and then have a resurrection?
Yeah, it wasn't so much that it was dormant, just that it wasn't necessarily front and center in terms of media coverage and sort of geopolitical strategy and everything else. But in the last 20, 30 years, technology has become more and more a part of our lives. And turns out a lot of that technology, including computing power, is powered by chips. And so the need for chips has only grown. And so now in the last few years, there's been a recognition about how important chips are to our economy, our way of life, and then also the role that supply chains play. And those supply chains were increasingly diversified and international over the last 20 plus years. And now there's an effort to bring more of that back home.
Right on, right on. So Skip, let's go to, well, you seem to be excited about this, Ms. Aberson.
Well, you know, I mean, just to expand a little bit further on that chip war with China, it's really, I mean, it's concerning a little bit, right? Because it's directly tied to our economy. So you just mentioned about $500 million in Oregon and then $40 billion in projects. And I did appreciate that you connected that to construction. But, you know, painting with a wide brush, Skip, you know, Oregon is made up of so many industries, right?
Yep.
Outside. But it seems like it's so, especially with this big infrastructure build, construction, right? And then, or manufacturing. But these industries feed so many different titles, right? Project management, PR, marketing, what else? Like, you know, administrative, HR and stuff like that. I feel like those jobs get a little bit lost in the conversation, especially when people would say, why does it matter to me? I am not in construction. I don't manufacture chips.
Right.
Why does $500 million and $40 billion matter to somebody like me? Can you make the connection? Because I feel like some people are sleeping at the wheel here in terms of that. But it's also like one of those cash machines. It's like, how would I get any of that money? How does it impact me?
Yep. Yeah. So I think, you know, you've done an awesome job essentially laying out the case for essentially traded sector economic development. So the idea is you're focusing on industry sectors that export goods and services globally from a particular region. And those types of industry sectors, traded sectors, semiconductor being one of them, has the effect of creating what are described as multiplier effects by economists. So they result in far greater economic benefit to a region, spanning a lot of different types of businesses that provide services and goods to those traded sector companies and also the employees.
Right. And I'm just hoping that is that our economists' job? Let's State of Oregon's economists, because I know that, you know, you guys play a role, but I'm just saying, whose role is it to connect the dots to all of this infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of folks involved, everything from our workforce system to higher ed in terms of the talent piece. And then there's also economic development organizations at the state and local levels who are working on things like infrastructure and buildable land and land supply. And then you've got policymakers that are looking at things like land use policy and workforce policy and the things that, you know, legislatively can support some of this work. So it's definitely a lot of different folks involved. And yeah, we definitely play a piece in that as it relates to helping local companies find out who's who locally doing work in workforce and higher ed and economic development, et cetera.
Right.
So we're more of a connector in that respect.
Right. So speaking of, John, and this is your favorite subject, it has to do with the train. Okay, so I think you know where I'm going with this. We recently
is it a high-speed train or is it a slow one? Because I'm looking for a high-speed rail myself.
We recently attended a tech summit called Silicon Forest, right? It's Oregon's tech summit. And this one was in January, right at the end of January. And it looked at equity, right? So this is the subject that's your favorite, right? And John, I know you and Skip have had this conversation before about when the tech train took off.
Yeah, it leaves the train. I mean, all them 35-year-old young white males were on the train. And the train got down the track, and then they start recognizing, damn, we got all this money and fun and technology and all this excitement and dreams ahead. We don't have any women on this train. Well, you know, it's a train full of young men. You got to have something going on, right? So they stopped the train and they let women on the train. And then, of course, they got down the tracks a little bit further and they just kept on going and they were having such fun. And then they start to think, our music sucks. We need to get us some African Americans or some people of color on this train. And so they stopped the train and now here we are. But now are you telling me that the train is a different train leaving now?
Well, I mean, now it's infrastructure and representation matters, Skip, right?
Yep.
So we're not just talking about software developers, hardware developers, and that kind of stuff, which is where we were. As John alluded to, it's like the addition of artificial intelligence, the infrastructure in broadband and stuff has significantly accelerated this, right? So now you got this train on rocket fuel that can fly to the moon. And I'm saying I think this is just another example of how, you know, black and other, you know, under marginalized communities are going to get vastly left behind.
On Earth while everybody's on the moon?
Vastly left behind.
That sounds like a Gil Scott-Heron song.
in this
Beep is on the moon.
John, did you hear his numbers? 500
billion. Yes.
40 or 500 million, 40 billion worth of projects. And I'm just saying, you're a black man. Do you have any black friends that you know are getting any of that money?
You remember that time we was over at the high school over there, and I think it was, I don't know, who was it trying to support us in trying to ascertain the black community if young people were interested in technology.
Right.
And so we went around the room and asked them, and
they said how many wanted to go in the technology industry in 2012.
Right,
yeah.
and out of the 10 of them, nobody raised their hand.
Nobody raised their hand.
But 9 of them were on their phones that were one of those
instruments, iPhones,
smartphones. And I said, well, y'all don't even know that you in the business already. You own it 24/7. You know.
So do you know anybody?
No, not to this level as I look at it. And when you start thinking about...
we've interviewed a couple of people that are probably going to be instrumental in that.
Yeah, but I think that this can still get a little bit more into the tapestry of those communities.
So let's talk about that, Skip, about representation in tech, especially representation in this movement. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I would say that there is still a ton of work to be done as it relates to increasing access to tech careers. And that spans across a number of different gender sort of divides, ethnicity, geography, socioeconomic, et cetera. There's a lot more work to be done. I would say that a couple of trends. Number one, there's a more concerted focus in the last few years with federal and local funding focused on access from a workforce standpoint as people are looking to start their careers. So in Oregon, there's a project, an initiative underway called Future Ready Oregon, which is about $200 million focused on tech, manufacturing, and healthcare jobs for specifically underrepresented people, historically underrepresented in those sectors. And so there's work going on to both provide organizations that are serving those communities with the resources they need to better identify folks who want to pursue those careers and then get them into programs that there's also funding for to further scale the ones that are successful and create new ones where that's possible, where there are gaps. And so Future Ready is a big pot of money just for Oregon, focused on helping to get more people the access and training that they need.
Wow.
Future Ready,
to find those on-ramps.
And has that rolled out?
Yeah, it
Is
started.
that part of the infrastructure money that came out? It's a component of it?
Federal funding specifically flowing through Oregon. And so it was Governor Kate Brown. That was one of her last efforts before leaving office. And then Governor Kotek has since kind of picked it up and run with it as a priority. And so there's consortia with both industry folks as well as workforce and communities of color from around the state who are involved in helping to shape this work. And so there was a $35 million round of grant funding that went specifically to organizations that work with underrepresented communities in the state to help them build capacity, which is great because you can't just throw a bunch of money at organizations programmatically and say, here's all these programs that are really top heavy. Good luck, even if you don't have the people and the resources to kind of scale up.
Well, how'd you identify these organizations, Skip? I mean, because we didn't see very much in the line of advertisements, communication. Like, how did you identify these organizations?
Yeah, so first of all, I have to clarify, I'm not involved in identifying these organizations.
How did they, how did they identify them?
But yeah, with the state of Oregon, they have the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, which has put together a number of groups that help to select the folks who apply. So they did a big call for proposals. This was back in, I think it was beginning of 2022, end of 2021. Last year, there was another round of grants that went out to different programs that wanted to get more resources to kind of scale up. And there's another round yet still to happen that's going to be coming out pretty soon this spring. So there's multiple rounds of funding kind of rolling down the pike.
Right.
And I think, one of the challenges that any government initiatives face is that government is not terribly great at marketing.
Right.
And oftentimes there aren't a ton of resources to really get the word out
Right.
broadly and widely.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a number of organizations that haven't been necessarily part of the traditional workforce solutions related to tech manufacturing or healthcare that are now in the mix.
Right.
Which is cool. But to your point, it sounds like there could be some more work to be done.
Yeah,
in
it
getting
sounds
the word
like
out.
the outreach can be more
Well, that's
engaged
why,
that way.
conversations like this are so critical and why we always invite Skip into
Yeah.
our
No, I'm loving it. But
environment.
of course, I'm chomping at the bit to get to the elephant in the living room. Y'all know what that elephant everybody talking about is that AI. So let's.
So John, you
let's-
mentioned the Grammys, right?
Oh, yeah.
Recently, the Grammys that happened last night, and something that's really cool about artificial intelligence and all this. It's all over the news right now, but even on the Grammys, these guys, Meta, TikTok, Facebook, they've been on the hot seat in Congress lately,
Yep.
for being responsible for the mental health of our youth and our users. But TikTok was trying to, all these videos go viral, right? All this technology that we're using, these videos go viral, and a lot and it's attached to music artists, right? So a music artist can get an incredible boost from the music that's happening. And so Universal Music recently pulled all of its contract with TikTok, or didn't renew its contract with TikTok. They couldn't come to agreement. So as a result, they pulled their licensing, and just like that, millions of users lost their reel catalogs, libraries, right? So they'd go back and look at their past reels on Instagram or whatever, and they're not there anymore, right? So technology is playing an incredible influencer, right? Even on our entertainment sector, right? Our leisure sector.
Interesting.
But and then going back to the chip manufacturing, right? There's now chips with artificial intelligence in it. Is that how that works with AI capabilities? So that's what we're really building also, right?
Yeah.
AI chips.
Well, and also a lot of the
Not
AI
just Doritos.
and the AI in general is also really dependent on chips, and increasingly more and more powerful chips to power the AI.
Wow.
And
So how does all that work? Chip, like, I don't want to date myself, but man, I've been around in a segment of time in some of the most progressive advancement of the human experience in that window, from the time computers and telephones and all that stuff. Cell phones, not telephones. Going back to
Smoke
the bell,
signals. Weren't you there when smoke signals
hell
were
to the no.
still
No,
the-
don't
still
even
the
try that
thing?
shit. But I think that when I look at this whole thing, I'm trying to somehow or another engage. How does this all work? Number one, in relationship to its advancement and its in terms of its integration into the technology reality. And then, of course, you hear the scare tactics constantly that, we need to be concerned about the boogeyman in the room with this thing.
The
So,
AI?
the
Yeah,
AI.
especially
So,
in minority communities,
well,
right?
but why does this AI want to eat minority people?
Well,
it's
I mean,
kinda
that's
like,
that's the question.
Yeah.
I mean,
Did
there's
they
already.
turn it on us?
I don't know.
Something?
Let's
Okay.
hear from Skip and
Oh,
see what
really?
he has to
Okay.
say.
Skip, tell us a little bit about the AI.
Well, I think with AI, obviously there's a lot of hype right now around what it can do, and also potentially some of the pitfalls, right? And so I think it's important to look at how is AI defined, and there are some really good definitions out there with respect to the National Institute of Standards and Technologies that's done some work in this space, and then also the federal government. So the White House issued some guidelines and parameters and frameworks really that the large tech companies agreed to this fall. And a lot of those hone in on a few areas where we, as a society, should be a little more careful around where AI is being used, right? So things like decisions that relate to employment, to education, to healthcare, criminal justice, right? Those are all areas where a lot can be impacted in someone's life if the technology that's delivering information or potentially making an automated decision is biased or not working properly, right?
Gotcha.
So those are the areas that at least the federal government at this point has said we're going to need to pay closer attention to these because there's more at stake.
It's kind of fascinating because last year the conversation was about how technology was being used to engage community development and those types of social services, all those kinds of things. But that conversation came before the AI conversation. Was the AI still in that conversation earlier when we started talking about how we were going to take technology back to the human experience and try to somehow or another use it to shape communities and all those other kind of things? So what's that? Is there an integration there, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, AI has been a part of technology for a long time now, and there's newer flavors of it that were really, I think, brought to bear by OpenAI in particular, and ChatGPT, and then GPT-4, and various iterations where it became more broadly accessible to people to actually play around with, and people were started to say, "Oh, okay, this is interesting." That was generative AI, right? And so, we've still got ways to go before what's known as kind of general AI, which is kind of the human-like capabilities of AI technology. But they're taking a step back for a sec. I think when you kind of peel away the layers of the hype, really AI should be about data. Because in order to have effective AI, you need good data.
Good data.
And so if you have bad data, you're going to have bad AI, right? Because the AI is dependent on the data.
Yeah, the data,
And so that's where a lot of the underlying bias and privacy issues can be addressed. And so I don't think we need to necessarily say we need an entirely new framework in all cases to address some of the downsides of AI, because there's already been a lot of good work going into place around consumer data privacy issues and
the
bias
NFL,
as it relates to data.
Which the NFL is taking it on, which I can see how in sports it could probably be effective. Because you got enough repetitive information in feed, and how they're looking at it now. They're talking about the way people even position their bodies enough time can be a sort of early diagnosis what could potentially happen, for knees or for ankles and all that. I think that kind of technology for that is a real effective technology. I'm a little bit concerned, though, when we're expecting the technology to be responsive or make decisions,
I get concerned with some humans that way.
Well, but at least humans can back up and go, "Oh, I'm sorry."
So we need an apologetic AI person.
Well, it's a great point. Yeah, there's definitely
AI,
some
could you
areas-
apologize to me, please?
There's no emotion in the AI.
Well, there are definitely some areas that where AI is being applied and technology in general is being applied where it eliminates human bias, right? So like you take the human out of the equation, a human's going to get certain things wrong more than right in a lot of cases. And
I know a species of people that have been trying to take the emotions out of this deal for quite a long time. I ain't going to say their name, but, feeling less, I don't think I want to live in a world with no feelings at all.
Go on.
But yeah, no, it's so like there's different sort of variations on this. Like one is for a while now, we're going to be in a situation where AI to be effective needs to be trained by humans. And so we have the ability, the agency to actually shape what the AI becomes and what it does. We also have the ability at this point to define, okay, what do we want to see AI applied to and in what ways? And so if you think about it, like in the educational context, having essentially an AI coach, a personal assistant, if you will, that can, be more attuned to what you need in real time. So you think about like how a teacher can be using and working with certain AI tools to help provide real-time feedback on things that maybe don't require as much of a human element, like doesn't require empathy, but just like, hey, here's the data, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know about that one, because when you think about how long it took Apple to change the culture of emojis, right? When I think about this, I'm going, Well, damn. If all them 35-year-old white guys is on this train that left the track, well, I'm wondering what they teaching these damn
well,
robots.
I think you can do that now, though,
You know
John.
what I
We
mean?
talked about that. You can, deliver the news to me like a Southern Baptist minister would, and the ChatGPT will do that, or will attempt to do that.
I mean, right now it's being used in things that require analysis of a lot of data, right? So, like,
Right.
the
That's
legal
the key.
industry,
Right.
marketing,
Input.
Yep, input.
Yeah.
And so it's going to help make humans more efficient. So in some cases, you're going to see some displacement of workers where you're not going to need quite as many. But at the same time, there's also a whole set of new skills and new positions that are being created in relation to AI.
Yeah, and this is where it gets concerning again, Skip.
Well, it
when
may
you
get
talk
concerning,
about,
but it may
well,
not be.
when you talk about representation,
Right.
John, is, because that's why it's so important to have this conversation on your show, John, on
Right,
Black
right,
Beat Podcast.
Right, because Fidel was here in our last show, and I think that's an indicator perhaps where we can strategically be trying to get to. In other words, when I think about AI and I think about the type of technology, and when we think about the whole idea of it being more equitable, more diverse, meaning that no one can really dominate this thing. I mean, you can't just have a white father take AI off to the side and let me teach it all my traditions, all my ways, and then come to realize that it lacks empathy to the degree of the things that need to have some empathy with it, right? So I would hope that the search for input is really the significance of that, more so than not just the technology coming on board, but more or less being concerned about how we feed that technology and what we feed it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the governance over that, to me, needs to be more significant, I would think.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
even so, Skip, the Technology Association of Oregon has grown, right? And I would suppose over the last 3 years it's even grown. So tell us a little bit about what you're focusing on. How are you keeping? What are you guys doing over there?
Right,
Yeah.
and then what neat
What are you
toys? What
doing?
neat toys
Well,
can we
let's
go
go-
out there and buy? But we'll get to
the
that one.
toys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
Yeah, so last few years, we've obviously seen a lot of growth in some of the things we've been talking about, right? So it's like the rise of semiconductors and advanced manufacturing again, and also related industries that like material science and climate tech.
Right.
And, and what's interesting too is a lot more startups. Right, so we're seeing more variety than we did coming out of the Great Recession in 2011 to 12, where it was a lot of B2B software as a service apps, right?
Yeah, apps. Yeah,
And now we're seeing folks from a variety of different types of backgrounds, much more so than we did before. Still more work to be done,
right.
but there's more people coming forward with different experiences getting into tech. And so as a region, we have to be making sure that with the growth in startups, that we're providing them with the resources they need to be successful. And sometimes that looks like capital. Sometimes it's connections to early customers that could be, local, and also it's access to mentors, advisors, et cetera. And so that's been an area we've been focused on. We're doing some more partnerships with other early stage entrepreneurial support organizations. Like there's one called RAIN, which has been in existence for quite some time now. It focuses on underrepresented entrepreneurs as well as rural.
Right.
Here and also internationally. They've been doing some work in Pakistan and other places. So they have some grant funding where they asked us if we could help partner as part of some of our programming to identify folks who are underrepresented and are building potentially high growth tech companies.
Wow.
In the area. And so this started the end of last year. We'll be continuing throughout this year. And what's nice is we're seeing more collaboration across more orgs locally. But the thing is that when we're talking about the semiconductor industry,
Right.
we're talking about workforce, right?
Yeah.
And people who are working as employees.
Right.
That's one aspect of the equation.
Right.
The other is wealth
We're
creation.
hearing you loudly and clearly about
Yeah.
the workforce.
The
piece.
other-
I mean,
There's
I'm
wealth
sorry, the
creation
other
and
aspect was-
entrepreneurship.
wealth
right?
creation?
So
Yeah.
owning
Yeah.
the IP and owning sort of the capital, if you will, that's being invested. And so
and how do you? And not to interrupt you on that one, but how does that all work? Though that's the thing I'm trying to get my head around. I'm trying to figure out. Well, okay, if I'm an entrepreneur, how do I get involved with investing in this, especially if my knowledge of the technology is minimal?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what would be a thing or an example of how a person who has limited knowledge with a pocket full of money invest in something like this?
Yeah, there's actually an organization here that has been around for about the last 15 plus in its current form, and it's called the Oregon Venture Fund. But it focuses on early stage angel investing as well as some later stage now. But they have a train the trainer model, right? So it's all focused on lifting up folks who want to become angel investors and providing them with real world experience, working alongside other more experienced angel investors to evaluate deals, learn the tools of the trade, and also they can pool resources so that they get a piece of maybe a bigger opportunity.
Yeah, I want one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I want. I want one of them. You think we can get one of them? Buy one of them?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Is my short answer.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Sign me up.
Well, I think on that note that he was speaking of the what the Technology Association of Oregon has been leading, right? So some of it's that conversation in terms of exclusively, but I mean, how does it fit into the broader? Because you're a chapter, so tell me about the structure.
Yeah, we're
TOW, how you came on deck, and how you fit into the bigger picture.
Yeah, we're independent, so we have to essentially, raise money locally every year to make sure that we can keep the lights on and keep doing the work. And so we work with companies that are members, and then we provide services to those member companies. But because our nonprofit-oriented mission is focused on helping to grow the tech sector and make it an inclusive world-class innovation economy, we're also looking at how do we help folks who are looking to get into tech, maybe aren't currently members, and are looking to, as companies, kind of get their start as employees, trying to figure out, hey, how do I get the skills and access I need? So a lot of the work we do is in relation to higher ed, the workforce system, K through 12, helping those existing resources. That's where the resources are.
Yeah.
But oftentimes they're misaligned. They're not aligned to where the employers are going to hire, and they're not aligned to where the local communities are coming up and need the most help. So that's why I love the approach, at least on paper, of like future ready, right? Because it's one of the first times we've seen the workforce system in the state say, let's not only focus on employer needs, but let's also focus on the needs of potential candidates from underrepresented communities.
Yeah, that's nice.
So I hope to see that model repeated again and again in the state.
Yeah,
I do too, because a lot of the things at the Silicon Forest Tech Summit there was diversity. There were women on the stage, people of color and stuff, but it seemed like they're all from out of the state, right? It's like our school's not doing enough to grow them, our entrepreneur cycle's not doing enough. And so what I'm hearing you do is that they can do better. But let's make a transition to the fun part.
The toys.
This ain't been fun. The difference between Skip and Chip, I mean, we've been chipping and skipping right on down to this point. So what kind of toys you got out there, Skip? That some that we should be interested in.
I saw that
about.
Apple just released their ocular glasses, $3,500 to get on this, those glasses, but it doesn't have a remote, and that was a big news item this weekend in tech and science. But what do you see in tech? I mean,
so those are very impressive, but those are expensive. And until the price comes down, I don't think we're going to start to see a lot of broad-based innovation focused on those.
Yeah, especially looking like fishing goggles, scuba diving goggles. I mean, do they have a backup detector in them or a front detector in them when something's coming near?
Yeah.
When you're blind?
But yeah, I'm just wondering, is Oregon putting out any tech toys or what's going on with us?
I had a chance to go to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas a few weeks ago. We took a few companies from Oregon as part of a federal and state program that subsidized part of their
Where'd you go down to the expo
costs.
Down there?
Yeah, I mean, it was 131,000 people there from all over the world.
So it was like, I miss going to the Magic Show. This must have been very similar, huh?
It's their annual tech show.
And a lot of like quote unquote tech toys, right? What you would consider like consumer facing stuff. Like there was a sort of display technology that was completely see through. And at first I'm like, that's kind of a gimmick, but I'm thinking about my own house with like a flat screen on the wall. No one wants to see the back of the wall or like the wires on the back, right? I'm like, what would that be used for? But then they had a a setup where they had like a candy store, and the case that had all of the confections, the candy, and like these little cookies in it was completely see-through. And you look at it, you're like, okay, that's just a glass case.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't glass. It was actually flat screens.
Wow.
Where the glass usually is, so you could see right through, unimpeded. But then on command, they could make all sorts of images and advertising, and like a touch menu, right on the
screen.
On the screen. So that's kind of like but again, that's not necessarily game changing. It's just got like a wow factor.
Yeah,
to
the
it.
way they're doing it. Yeah.
And then a lot of robots. Like everything from in the healthcare space, like companionship for folks who are kind of aging in place or elderly. And also with more AI in, they can be more attuned to someone's needs and sort of wants during the day. I think there's also been a lot around mobility and transportation, especially last mile. So there are all these cute little robots delivering things and walking around or rolling around the show floor. And, so there's, and then also just more and more around cars. Like that is now the largest car show in the world. The Consumer Electronics Show.
Wow. Skip,
the largest car show in the world?
Driving,
were they flying
they're
cars?
Driving
were
computers.
they flying? But were there any hover ones or flying ones?
Yeah, there's everything from like marine to terrestrial and land-based, and then there's also some work going on now with like air taxis.
What's that?
Well, they look like, many of the earlier versions look like helicopters, essentially. It's just the idea of like someone traveling in urban environments and elsewhere by taxi, but it's like a drone. And now they're creating later versions
Drones
of that.
are delivering people?
Well, they that's the goal. Is
they can,
Well,
I wouldn't. If they can deliver a bomb, they should be able to deliver a child.
That takes,
but
Mommy, where do babies come from? The drone, honey.
but Skip, but it leads me back to the conversation, and I like the fun part about this. But you're aged. I would assume at a real strategic time in your life where you're aged in the 50-50, right? You got one foot in the past, ways going, and then you got one foot in the future. Me, I'm reluctant, right? I'm at that age where I'm reluctant because of the non-human characteristics of this thing, because I'm already behind the 8 ball on the human side of this shit. What's going to happen when I get to when y'all get these robots and shit running around here, right? But really, Skip, as you're looking at this, and you're looking at the demographics of people who are difficult to reach, right, with this technology and the advancement of it, what are you recognizing are some of the characteristics that these demographics, what are some of the resistant or inherent barriers that you're running into with these demographics when it comes to advancing them in this technology aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I would say some of it relates to trust. Right. I mean, it's okay. What's the motivation of the person who's supposedly trying to help? Right.
Yeah.
Or the company or the institution. And so, in the case of government, for example, there's a lot of issues around government use of technology.
Yeah.
Because government has the ability to essentially take away people's freedom. Right.
Yeah,
and so it's a lot more fraught. And also with government, there's also the issue of politicization. So people are often questioning, well, okay, government with AI, what could go wrong? Well, there's potentially a lot of things. There's also the challenge around mis and disinformation. And we haven't really gotten into that, but, again, back to the data issue. As more and more platforms are using automated decision systems throughout and are used to influence what we want to buy, how we want to react to information that's being fed us, et cetera, there are opportunities to essentially corrupt that. And so from a cybersecurity standpoint, there's a lot more innovation going into how to prevent, using AI, how to prevent folks from messing with the underlying data sets.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, because after all, the control, you would think that the control would be in the hands of the person with the money, right? I mean, especially when you look at these models of investment and those types of things. I mean, the whole concern that we have is how do you take away the investor's control in terms of strategic development of a product or something like that? I mean, does he or she still have the last word? You know what I'm saying? When it comes, well, no, put that aspect in there. Regardless of what you may think it's going to do, I still want that in there, right? And so he has a kill switch or an activation switch or whatever, and ultimately having control. I mean, because after all, that's what capitalism really is all about. He who wins, right?
Yep.
Elon Musk.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, nothing but white people on the moon. It's like I said, Gil Scott Heron saw it a long time ago. Well, Whitey's on the moon.
Whitey's on the moon.
But
yeah.
So,
good question, John. Good thought line. So,
yeah.
what do you think, Skip?
Yeah, Skip. I mean, how do we regulate? And then, of course, less federal government involvement, right? Everything they always say, more less government involvement, more freedom. So do you think we're headed – okay, so that question that I originally asked you about being in that flex phase of seeing this, do you see us heading into dangerous ground, or do you see us heading into something exciting times where shit's going to get better instead of get worse?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if I were to look at the 50-50 analogy, I mean, there's a lot that you could get really excited about, and there's definitely, quote-unquote, techno-optimists who are, it's all rainbows and unicorns.
Right.
And then there's the other side of it, which is it's all doom and gloom. And I think the future is probably somewhere in the middle. But we still have, I'll go back to this, the opportunity to help shape it. And I think a critical piece to this is helping more and more folks understand how technology works and also how the business models that are being created using technology, like who's making money and why and when and what those business models can do in terms of incentives. Because if people understand that, they have the ability to participate in our democratic institutions in an informed way and hopefully influence policy that impacts tech in a way that's informed. Right, because we get into problems where it's either manipulated by a few, the democratic system, or it's essentially impacted by folks who are just kind of quickly reacting to something as opposed to thinking through. Well, okay, wait, who's involved here? Who are the stakeholders? What are their motivations? And what does good policy look like? And sometimes I think we end up looking at our government institutions and how they've kind of fallen, I guess, in recent years around trust and their ability to execute on things, just the basics, where that's unfortunate because we need them to be in a stronger position relative to sort of our society if we're going to be able to figure out what this careful dance is between too much regulation, not enough clarity, and certainty, both for the people developing the technology and for the folks using it, and who's impacted by it, right? So all of those things need to be taken into consideration. When we have folks in government who have no clue, it's problematic.
Well, Skip Newberry, y'all, President and CEO of the Technology Association of Oregon. Skip, we appreciate you, man, coming on the show, man, and sharing a little, because this was fun, man. I sometimes when I had this conversation about technology, I think I can sort of get the gist of it, but I think there's so many nuances that have disparities involved in them across the board that how do you shake out the wrinkles in a blanket and start anew, right? And you would think that the technology aspect of this wouldn't be tainted with the historical relevance of our society and our lives here in America. And, to be able to move things along, to be able to help us advance on a bigger picture where all boats are rise instead of but then the very nature of capitalism, y'all. But anyway, welcome to this episode of Black Beat Podcast, y'all. This was gas. This was gas. Fawn, would you want to take us out of here or what?
No, that's good. Skip, just, how can people get a hold of you, in touch with you, involved with you? What do you got coming up? You've got an events calendar, I know.
Oh, yeah. Before you answer that, Skip, but just real quickly, man, I do this every once in a while, just real quickly as we close. If there was a question that I could have asked you that you hoped that we should have asked you, what was it that you would think our listeners need to hear? What is it? Or did you think we covered enough information in relationship to the things that people need to hear?
I would say that we're kind of living through the beginning of a big change, right? 75-year generational change. And tech is a big piece of that, especially AI. And so I would say if folks want to get involved now in technology, there are fewer times that are going to be more exciting than now, right?
Yeah.
So it's early on. You have a chance to help shape it. And so for folks who are interested in learning more about tech careers or thinking about starting a tech business, encourage them to do so. And there's lots of great organizations locally that help on the early stage entrepreneurship journey. We're involved in that mix too. And yeah, we have a website, techoregon.org. We have a new website we're launching by the beginning of March. You got to love websites. They're always lagging indicators in terms of what's really going on. So we're finally catching up a little bit. So we're excited about that. And then I would say in terms of what I'm hopeful for is, John, you and I were alluding to this before we started the show around Oregon's also going through an inflection point. So is Portland, right? Yeah. There's a lot going on. There's huge investments coming down the pike.
Yeah, man.
There's a corner that needs to be turned. And so, again, we have an opportunity to build toward a future that we all want to see. And right now, I don't know about you, but as an Oregonian here now, I talk to my kids and they're like, hey, has anyone talked about what the future of Portland or Oregon looks like?
Yeah, man.
I don't think any of us around this room could actually articulate what that looks like based on what someone in, say, City Hall or in Salem has told us. So I think it's a chance for all of us to think about what that collectively looks like.
Yeah, and that's what makes it a little bit more scary because of the fact that there's just no freelance in this reality. There's a strategic agenda, but I don't know if we got the agenda yet. So
I'm not sure anybody does.
Yeah.
I think this is like he said, these are unusual times, unusual circumstances, and with all of this innovation coming fast and furiously, right?
Yep.
Skip, we appreciate you as usual, man, always. Keep on bringing us the technology. Just don't let us be the last to know. All right, y'all. We appreciate y'all. Hey, look here, y'all. Come on. Hit that button. Subscribe. We got a magazine getting ready to hit the marketplace this month also, y'all. And I'd like y'all to make sure you stay on top of Flossin Media, y'all. This is our 20th anniversary, and we hope to bring you some more exciting news and content as we keep traveling. Y'all have a wonderful afternoon.